Hello, and thank you for joining me, David. Today in May 2026, it is my honor to actually sit down with you on Zoom instead of, across the desk from me on my red couch, which is like your permanent feature when you
Which
in
is always a
Karachi.
pleasure, always a pleasure.
I know, and it's really good in the kind of conversations we have, and then the people who come in and meet you, and
Yeah,
whether by design or by default, it's always been absolutely wonderful. So I have really missed having you here this year, but hopefully next year you will be here with a brand new show and some not so
inshallah.
brand new works,
Mm,
but it will be happening. So
mm.
here goes. This is just a very informal conversation between you and I because I know what an intrinsic part of the Pakistani art world you have been from the start, from the time you graduated from the Wimbledon School in 1980 and henceforth came to Pakistan and taught over here, started the Karachi pop movement. You were an integral part of the Karachi pop movement all through the 90s. You have trained a number of sculptors primarily, but artists by and large, because you have taught at the Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture in Karachi for such a long time. I can't even remember the number of years. And then after that, when you moved to Lahore, you taught at the Beacon House National University. So there's been a very, very long association of David Chalmers Alesworth as being an integral part of Pakistan, of training students, and of giving so much of your time because you're a researcher at heart. You're
Yeah,
actually
I
an
think so. Yeah,
archaeologist at heart,
yeah,
and
yeah.
just somehow during
Lovely idea.
you just sort of meandered into art, but you're basically an
It's funny you
archaeologist.
say that because, I always wanted to be a marine biologist, actually.
Really?
And my maths was never great,
Okay.
and then at some point I went to not a university, I went to a college in Weybridge.
Okay.
And that was where the racetrack was actually, which was extraordinary. And there was a massive nature reserve there, full of tree rhododendrons. And two young art graduates from Royal College had set up the art department there, which was really a lethal dose. Because they were freshly graduated, they were really dynamic, and that just completely seduced me into dropping the sciences and going for the arts. And I went through loads of potential A levels at that point, a ridiculous number. Probably didn't do any of them the credit that they were due. And then I ended up in art school before I knew it.
Wow. And then you did
Mm.
more than enough justice to the arts because your
Sweet of
trajectory
you
of
to say so.
no, it's
Yeah.
true for
I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that, but when I look at art history and I look at people who really have achieved things in that context, um, in extraordinary ways. I mean, many of those people in the past have been sort of parts of generations of movement forward. And I think, from the modernist period onwards, we've been in a very different kind of space. But, we all have ideas about practice. And of course, being in the UK now, it's another place entirely.
yes, but you're forgetting
Not
that you
necessarily a better place in Pakistan, I have to say.
but I think, David, you're not giving yourself enough credit. I think you were, like I said earlier, an integral part of the Karachi pop movement. Now, whether people have forgotten about that because that predates the social media influx and how people only
Mm.
relate to things which are current and here and now and
Yeah,
popping up on
yeah,
Instagram. But we all,
yeah.
as Karachiites, as people who were
Mm,
part of the art
mm,
world in the 90s, we all
mm.
remember. We
Yeah.
remember the contribution
Well,
of.
it's good you say so. I mean, I feel Pakistan's been incredibly beneficial to me. I mean, what a different life I would have had I stayed in the UK. And I can speak about that because a lot of the people in the studio complex, I'm in Spike Island in Bristol,
Yes.
which is a really interesting art space, and it's got a lot to do with why we came to Bristol in the first place. Something like 10, 11 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
But I look at them, and a lot of them would have been my contemporaries coming out of art school. And I have to be careful what I say here, but I think they have fairly miserable lives. And they have throughout, and there isn't. And just the idea that someone goes into a studio on their own and closes a door on the world, I find extraordinary in the context of my years in Pakistan and the kind of connection that happened there and the movement of people through the studio. You know, and that came about because I don't know if you know this, but what happened was my brother died and I didn't go into the studio for a while. This was when I was living in KDA in Karachi. Right. Studio was outside. I was with Duria Kazi. And when I went back into the studio, and I had sort of plastic draped over all my tables where I was working with kind of cast metals and things. And drug addicts had gone in at night and stolen everything, thrown it onto the hospital roof next door. I found some of it there. I found some of it in the scrap markets of Karachi, but it just wiped out the studio for me. And what happened was I just started making things in the city between workshops. I mean, one of the beautiful things about life in Pakistan is a lot of it is visible, a lot of it happens outside. And you really appreciate that coming back to the UK, where everything is behind a brick wall. Right. Not just the people, every kind of activity. Yeah. And so you're just not exposed in the same way. And even if you wanted to aspire to work with some of those processes, you'd need a huge Arts Council grant to touch them, you know. So there's so many things I know about in different ways, having lived here for the last 10 years. What can I say? Yeah.
Also, I know...
I miss my life.
I know you miss your life in Pakistan because we all miss you over here. But I also know that when you come to Karachi, it's as if the connection was never lost. You back in those marketplaces, you back in those alleys, you have those same connections that you have forged and remained connected with, whether it's Karachi.
You say so. I mean, true. Here I'm just looked at as a weird old man with some strange history. Well, it's a very ageist society here as well. You know, somewhere along the road I got old.
Why?
I don't know. But it's funny because, I mean, you know, I wouldn't say growing up in Karachi, but there was a time in Karachi where I was looking at a generation of people who were older, you know, were at the end of their life's practice, and we were younger and, you know, in a different place entirely. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, suddenly, I mean, maybe Kudus would feel the same way. Suddenly you find yourself in a very different space in life and you sort of wonder what happened, you know.
Yeah, I hear you. I think when we see ourselves in the mirror, we don't really recognize the person in the mirror.
When if you saw yourself in the mirror, I don't think you'd be too bothered. You look great.
Thank you. Okay. So on that note, so tell me what is happening with David today in Bristol, Spike Island. I know you just had open studios, and I know there are lots of very exciting things that are happening right now. So tell us about that.
Well, I'll tell you pros and cons. I mean, people have always sort of said to me in the context of the UK, you should just work on a carpet project on your own. It would evolve in so many new ways and you get so much out of it. The carpet which Qatar has just purchased for their collection.
And congratulations for that.
Yeah, I've been working on it for, I was going to say 13 years, but it's, you know, it's around 12 or 13 years. I mean, I started it before I left Lahore.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is it's been shown a number of times in the UK, and then it's come back into my studio, and I've worked on it some more. And now it's going into this museum in Qatar, and I won't be able to work on it some more. But I quite like the idea that it's always mutating in this way. So I'm thinking I should be careful what I say here. I was this carpet for Qatar. So what I was saying about that was people have been saying to me for years, you should just work on something exclusively. And it took me that long to finish the work. And another aspect of that was that Dr. Furqan's work that he purchased was up at initially at the show there. And I saw it on the wall and I saw the number of trees on it. And I felt like I have another piece which is similar. It's a different part of Lawrence Gardens. It's a different orientation because I found a new heritage map which had plot numbers on it. And I found the plot numbers very interesting for lots of societal reasons. and I worked on that version, and I contacted them, and I because it got really good coverage and people were really interested in the work at the beginning of the show. And I proposed it to them. They said they're really interested in having it. And I stupidly said, well, if you have it, I want to add more trees to it, having seen the other one on the wall. And they said, well, how long would that take? And I said, it might take a year or 2 years. And they were sort of slightly horrified by the idea. But I thought I should have things covered. It has taken me about 2 years.
Right.
And I've just been embroidering trees for 2 years. And I've had all kinds of people come in and sit with me in the studio, including Taiki, who's a Japanese sort of ex-student who's a great fun to work with. I've been sitting in the studios through the winters with these kind of daylight lights, embroidering trees. And I've been realizing how I feel about the idea of being the single artist in a UK studio versus working in a community in Pakistan.
Yeah.
And, I'm hyper aware of it. It's not something that I welcome, actually. I think it's something that society has framed for many artists in the West,
Yeah.
And it's not a beneficent place to be.
But that's also because, David, that's also the nature of how you worked. You were so inclusive of the community that you worked with. You brought in the students into your life and you worked with them. That's not necessarily part of Pakistan or Bristol or England or something like that. That's really a part of you. And going back to you working on the carpet, I think for you it may have been a meditative process, because I've seen you sitting on my red couch embroidering. And for you, that process is very meditative, it's very contemplative. So I think while you're engrossed in doing something with your hands, you're also thinking of something else. So it becomes this combined, physical, emotional.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I think you're right. But I think one of the things that happens in contemporary art practice is things happen very quickly.
Yes.
I mean, we're used to a kind of studio process where you do things in days or weeks or months, but you certainly don't do it over a decade. And that's an extraordinary place to be.
Yeah.
And I can't say for 10 years plus I've only worked on it. I've got sick of it, put it away sometimes. But it puts you in a very different relationship with the work, for sure.
But then to go back to your practice, you are not just doing carpets. You're doing carpets, which is a huge endeavor, and that is very time consuming. So of course, I mean, this was exceptional, it taking a decade, but then even the others that I have been privy to have taken a long time. That hasn't stopped you from your botanical studies, from your research, from your photography, from your embroideries on other parts. So your work has always been, but it's also in a way, it seems fragmented to somebody who's not aware of your practice as a whole, but then it all kind of connects because you.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. I doubt it myself sometimes, but I mean, I work with Redoute a lot and PJ Redoute.
Yeah. There's
a whole kind of autobiographical aspect to that. My grandfather was a horticulturalist, and there's plants named after him. And I grew up with Redoutes. I never paid attention to them. But you've got to look back to a time when there was no photography in the world. And there's the West naming everything in the world with its botanical Latin, which isn't Latin at all.
Yeah.
So you name a plant, and somebody has to render it. Otherwise, what have you done?
Right.
So Redoute was very much the master of that.
Right.
That's why much as I love Redoute, I feel a compulsion to go and embroider them in Swati pink or whatever, as a way of drawing attention to it, but also as a kind of autobiographical reference to my life.
Correct.
It's extraordinary to think where we are and where we were just a short period away as a species on this planet.
I think the way you have mentioned that it's autobiographical, it somehow is your entire life. whatever your experiences were, whether growing up or in Pakistan, it all somehow comes through in your work. So when you did the Pioneer Cement residency with us in District Khushab, now
Mm.
think about it. You are in a cement factory
Yeah,
in Khushab,
yeah, yeah,
and what
yeah,
did you draw?
yeah. Yeah,
Right?
Drew Pants, that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
but
It's funny you're mentioning this because I'm just working on that work again right now because it's going into a show in London
oh,
in
excellent.
the near
Okay.
future. And I'm just and they're printing it. Some of it's going in billboards outside the show and it's going at billboard size. So I've literally been working through that over months.
How wonderful
And
is
in a
that?
way, it's a lovely thing to go back into that body of documentation and work.
And
And I
that's
literally been
uh,
doing that right up till yesterday.
and so that's what I always say, that when an artist truly gets enmeshed in a residency, it's not the work that immediately comes out, it's the work that eventually comes out. And it comes
Mm-hmm.
out in dribs and drabs over years
Mm-hmm.
because you have been moved away from your actual studio practice and thrown into a totally different
Yeah, yeah,
aspect. And then how
yeah.
you react to the surroundings, to the environment, to the people, to the interaction with a totally different class of people who are working at the grassroots level, who have no understanding of art. And then your teacher instinct always comes
Mm,
in, like when you're sitting with the carpet
mm.
weaver or you're sitting with the embroiderer, you are teaching them also. You're learning from them,
Well,
but you're
I
also
may be
teaching.
teaching them, but much as they're teaching me. And I feel the same way about the students I've worked with over the
Yeah,
years. I mean, a lot of those people are my very good friends,
correct.
people like Adan Madni, but so many others as well.
Yeah. And they
Um,
all love
and
you. I
you know,
mean, Amir
it's a
Habib,
mutual
Adila
way forward.
Suleiman, they all love you. They were your
Uh,
students, but they actually owe so much. And they say it. It's not something I am saying. They say it to
mm.
me, that they owe so much of who they are today to David Aylesworth. Because if
Yeah, it's a lovely
David
thing
had,
to hear.
if
Makes
David had
life
not been there,
worthwhile.
it's true, David. So you need to really take ownership
Mm,
of that you have been
mm,
very instrumental in a lot
mm,
of artists who are now so well known in Pakistan. You have been
mm,
their mentor. And the reason
mm,
you were their mentor is also because you had an open door policy,
mm, mm.
and you were very
Yeah,
receptive
yeah.
to what they were
Well,
doing.
that's a lovely thing. I think Pakistani art students as a whole should be aware of the magnificent work they do and the quantity of work they do. I mean, if they only had a clue how, now I should be very careful what I say here, but let's say how minimal the production in UK art schools is in comparison to their own, is really extraordinary.
So
You know?
I'm glad you're saying that, because I think
Mm.
people in Pakistan need to understand that we don't need to do everything that is being done internationally. Everybody has
Yeah,
their own
yeah,
strengths and weaknesses,
yeah,
and we need to
yeah.
embrace those strengths, right?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
don't need to
yeah.
ape anyone
I think
else.
so. I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, the amount of work that you do in a year is extraordinary. The number of shows that you run in a year is probably, in terms of world history, is
That's
hugely
because
significant. And that you kind of survived that instinct. But I mean, I think there's a huge amount to be said for work being turned over and put out into the community, maybe at not the highest prices internationally. But what you don't realize is people here are mostly dependent on Arts Council grants to practice at all. And they spend most of their lives writing extraordinary proposals for those grants. Those grants are kind of defined by some kind of social worker's idea of what an artist is in society. Is very problematic. And very little of that work goes out into the community, goes into collections, or even goes into museums.
yeah,
And I think that's hugely problematic for the practice of art. Whereas in Pakistan, there may not be the richest international kind of collectors in the world, or the most, or whatever, but it moves and it turns and it has a life,
that's true.
and that is so important,
Yeah.
as opposed to how it happens elsewhere. And you become ultra aware of these things when you move from all the time that I had in Pakistan to the time that I had here.
Because you've had the
Um,
privilege of knowing both, of of
Yeah.
living in both places
Sure.
and seeing the
Yeah.
pros and cons of both places, which
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
don't, you see, because when
Mm.
you're living here, you're only thinking of the fanfare of the West. So you're
Mm.
not really looking at how this little microcosm of society is actually doing so much more. And it's not
No.
just in
Yeah.
financial terms. And
No,
it
no,
is,
not at all. Yeah. No,
you
I
know,
totally get it. I mean, when we were doing Fukuoka, I mean, I remember um, asking office workers there to borrow their computers for, communication, and you were so aware of how little software sat on their computers. And of course, in Pakistan,
yeah,
every piece of software generated in the world sort of sits for a while on someone's computer.
yeah,
I mean, it's so important to know whether something's practical or usable.
yeah,
But in the West, in Japan, where everything happens according to the rule of law, you're just not exposed to anything.
yeah,
And I think Pakistan, I mean, I can't say about today, but it's perpetually felt like it's sort of below or outside other societies, and it makes a huge effort to be aware of world news and potential and whatever in a way that people who sit in these developed societies feel no obligation to look at the world or look at their position in it,
right.
which I think is massively problematic, actually.
I love everything you're saying, and I'm so glad that you are saying it because it's very
Yeah.
close to my heart, and it's something.
Well, don't promote it while I'm still alive, or they'll probably lock me up.
Do not say anything like that. We know that you are unwell, and all of us really, really wish you
Yeah.
well. And
Thanks. Yeah.
um,
They're saying I've got about 12 months left.
oh, David, don't talk like that.
I've had several. I've had two of them at least. It's crazy, isn't it?
David, believe in miracles, right?
Yeah,
I
of course they
believe in
do.
miracles,
Yeah.
and I believe in in prayers. So I
Yeah,
believe I
Yeah.
will be sitting across from you next year while you'll be showing with us.
Well,
I really
inshallah, I
believe
will
that.
do it. And I have so many people in the world praying for me. It's amazing. My brain is not microwaved in the process. But it's extraordinary. I have people all over the world
All
writing
over.
to me saying they're praying for me
Of course.
in all sorts of ways.
The power
So,
of prayer, David.
Yeah.
You are.
I'm not suggesting I
so
deserve
loved.
it. Still,
You don't need to say that. It's how people are reacting to hearing about the news that says it, right?
Mm.
I also wanted to bring to remind you of the wonderful show in Swansea in Wales last year. Exactly a year.
Yeah.
And I do have the catalogue of it, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah.
I've got good and bad things to say about it.
It's-
I mean, the bad things are reflections on myself. I mean, that's something I worked on for several years. It's a really interesting collection because it's a historical collection as well as a contemporary space.
Yeah.
And Glenvivian, I mean, I think it's Glenvivian, because what happens these days is I take a name like Glenvivian and it's the wrong name, and only halfway through the conversation I realize I got the wrong name. But anyway, it's Glenvivian
It is Glenvivian
collection.
Yeah.
And he dropped out of the kind of industrial process of the family and was a photographer who traveled, places like the subcontinent, taking very early photography.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did there was I dug into his photographic collection,
Right.
which was, extraordinary.
Yeah.
Shall I find an image and just show you? One sec.
Yeah.
And you'll know what I'm talking about.
I do, because I think I saw it in the exhibit downstairs in the vitrine.
Anyway, that's what I wanted to show you. So he's running around photographing native women, for instance. So what I did was I took Haldi and I extracted a photosensitive medium from it, and I revisited his photography like that.
Right.
And then it's called an anthotype, and it was one of the precursors to modern photography, which was created up the road in Bath, where I live here in the UK. And I put those back into the museum as a kind of returning the gaze in a way, like reframing that gaze. Mm-hmm. And I did a lot of things like that with their collection. And then we did the show. Now, the show consisted partially of me doing things like that, but it also had the Viceroy's flag, for instance, which, by the way, the Arts Council UK have just decided to take on.
Wow,
we'll talk
that's
about
wonderful
that.
news. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's just happened right now. probably
Excellent.
seeing it there, I think.
Excellent. That's good. But I just want to tell people who just heard you say haldi. Haldi is actually haldi, as in turmeric, and that's what the prints were. So I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
seeing
yeah,
them last year
yeah.
at the
That's
Swansea.
really interesting for me.
Yeah.
And so I put them back in. I did a lot of things, like small scale, kind of like looking at the collection, reframing it in different ways. I had a researcher working with me who went into the history. Now, the other elements in that show were people going into people's collections, studios, and taking out extraordinarily kind of developed and particular works, putting them into that show. And that's a very different position to be in the show. I mean, I had the Viceroy's flag as well,
Right. Yeah.
but it made me think about it in a very different way,
Yeah.
Yeah. It took a lot of my time. I had some research money, and I put a lot of time into it, and
You did, and
I,
it was also
and I suspended a lot of other things I might be doing. But I'm not sure if it's ultimately the best place to be, as an artist, to put yourself through that. I mean, you leave a kind of minor mark in a way.
You think it's a minor mark? The way I see it, I think you left an indelible impression, and not just with Haldi.
Did you make it to that show? I can't remember.
I was there for everything because
Yeah,
I
thought you were. Yeah,
I was there with Dr. Zera Jumaboy from the time of inception.
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
So-
I remember now.
So
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it, but I did discover things like, look at this guy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I remember
Amazing.
everything very well because that was just a year back, and we traveled to Swansea. I mean, who travels from Pakistan to Swansea otherwise? But we did. We did for the show because it was such a huge contingent of artists from Pakistan that were there, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And it was a very, very good historical show because how it was mapped and how it was presented was phenomenal. So
yeah, but this is another thing that happens to artists. Like this is in Swansea. Was it in Swansea? It's not so far away. But, you put work in a show, you go for the opening, or maybe you go for a talk, and then you go back to your place. And in a way, with shows like that, you should gather the artists together and put them together in a hotel or whatever. Give them like a week or so to talk to each other and be together with the work. I think that's really important, and that just does not happen. I'm not accusing anybody about this. This is the way the world is.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that be a different way to, I mean, for instance, the residency at Kushab put us in that situation, but the art market doesn't put us in that situation, or museums don't put us in that situation. But it's so important.
So, David, I'd like to actually say this: everybody is not as generous of their time and resources as Pakistanis are. You mentioned the Pioneer Cement residency in Kushab. It was done gratis by Canvas for a cement factory, which put all the artists up there for no monetary gain, right? So it was just for the love of art. Nobody got any money, and the artists were taken very good care of, and they got a chance to interact with each other and make or unmake or create or uncreate work.
That's another context. Here's my anger about the UK and the art market. We'll have a show here, and there'll be a champagne stall, where you can buy a glass of champagne for, I don't know what, £15, or maybe not that much, but nobody buys it. Maybe one or two people buy it and stand and talk to each other. The rest of them are just kind of, there's no food going around. There's nothing.
Well,
and then I feel like, well, even if you had somebody with a teapot and you poured people tea and they gathered together getting cups of tea, they would talk to each other, and you would create a sense of love and care. I mean, how screwed up is this society as a whole?
David, you have lived in Pakistan and imbibed of the hospitality for way too long. That's what it is. We are so busy. And our hospitality is so geared towards food and love that I think you going back has made you realize the lack thereof, right?
I think capitalist society here is all about dividing people into micro units as consumers. I mean, how awful it would be if they were to talk to each other
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, that's really how it feels here, living here.
But also,
If
I
you,
think because what you had mentioned earlier about spending so much of your time writing for grants, isn't that really taking away the creative process of actually
yeah,
making work? Because
it is,
you need
and
that.
it frames you in a particular way to think in a particular way,
Yeah.
which is not your own necessarily at all. You know, but it's kind of programmed into you, and I see it all the time from people around me. You
Yeah,
know,
and also then
uh,
it's the same pie, right? If you want to
yeah,
grant, the particular arts council that you are
yeah,
asking for has X amount of money, so then everybody
yeah, yeah,
becomes a competitor.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
here,
Exactly,
it's a
exactly.
different
Yeah,
kind of ball game. Your
yeah.
work is really, it's not
No,
what
no,
you are saying.
completely. I mean, and generationally, you know, there's a kind of love in that society and a connectedness,
Yeah,
which is, you know, not the story here. And I mean, maybe it's different in other parts of the country. And this isn't even London where I live, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think it's hugely problematic.
yeah. So
Yeah,
tell me, David, now what are your immediate plans? Like I said, you had this Swansea show, the Arts Council has
yeah,
acquired your work, the Qatar Museum has acquired your
yeah,
work. You just
yeah,
had the, you have another couple of
mm,
things lined up.
yeah,
What else
yeah.
are you doing in the
Well,
near future?
um, the sale of these works is extraordinarily complex, and it takes a lot of my time on a day-to-day basis, because what happens is you get transferred not to the accounts department, but to other people who are handling whatever it is. And I just put in a lot of, you know, I end up putting in months of my studio time just kind of adding the things that they need,
Yeah,
which is what I'm sort of doing these days. And I've now got people coming in on next Tuesday or Wednesday, and they're going to take the big carpet work for Qatar. They want to lay it out and micro photograph it for any faults that might be in it for
right.
insurance purposes.
Yeah,
And it's all fine, but it's just very time consuming.
it
And I
is.
have
It is.
you know, I have phone calls and emails and whatever. Like, uh, I mean, lovely as it is to make these sales, you wouldn't believe the kind of complexity these organizations.
Oh,
And that's just
I
one of
know.
them. The Art Council is another story as well. I've just been put in touch with the sort of admin department there and various people who are, you know, who are basically, I don't know what they are. Maybe they're chartered surveyors or something. But, you know, so there's a lot of that going on.
So that's
I've
all
just
what
got
you're
through
talking
the
about
studios,
is
which is,
David, what you're talking about is
yeah,
bureaucracy. And we've had that experience every
yeah,
time
yeah.
we've placed an artist's
Yeah,
work in a museum or a public collection,
yeah. You would
because
know. You would
yeah, so
know.
there is
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
back end work that goes through. You see, because
yeah,
you
yeah.
have to have condition reports, and like you said,
Yes, yes,
every
yes,
square inch of the work has to be
yeah,
photographed, documented. You
yeah,
have to put your
yeah,
stamp on it that everything is in pristine condition
yeah,
before you
yeah,
hand
yeah,
it over to somebody, and then there's all the shipment and transportation. So
yeah,
yes, I understand that.
yeah,
It takes away from so much of your
yeah.
creative juices,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Well, creative juices wise, I mean, I don't know about other people. I love working with people, and you know, I'm going to focus in the future. I mean, I'm trying to do that even now. I even feel, you know, when I'm coming to Pakistan, I'd like to be able to say to some of the artists here, why don't you just come and visit and see how other people, you
yeah,
know, how that society is. But um, not easy to do, but I would like to see it happen, you know. And there's some extraordinary people here making extraordinary work
yeah.
who I think would be all much better if they had a different kind of exposure to the world
So bring them
that they
here.
don't know that they live in, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
They
but I
shelter.
also want,
Yeah,
I want to work in a way. I mean, I love to come to Karachi and work in the markets, you
yeah,
know, and make things. And I intend to do that in the future if I have a future. Um, you know, and what I'm thinking is, I really can't take another winter here
right.
because it's not just the cold; it's the fact that it gets dark at 3 o'clock.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah, yeah,
and there's just no daylight, and you know, I just can't take another one of those.
so
So
just
I'm
come to
thinking,
Karachi, sunny
you know,
Karachi, with
yeah, and
lovely,
I'll come here for a bit in the summers. You know,
yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
and then you can
Yeah,
work here and do your
yeah,
carpets and all
yeah,
the bazaar trips that you love, and
yeah, yeah.
sip tea
It's funny.
with the
Go on.
people. Yeah, no, sit in the market and have tea with
Mm.
everybody, and then
Yeah, yeah,
you can be downstairs, and
yeah,
in the porch
Yeah.
of the gallery, and I
Yeah.
can photograph
Yeah.
you and your team
Yeah.
from upstairs like we've
Yeah.
done before.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Those
I
are
mean,
all
they just
great
take my
memories.
car away in the UK. I'm not allowed to drive here anymore because
know.
of this epilepsy I'm supposed to be suffering from. And
Yes.
so, if I was to hire a driver here, it might cost me, a couple of £1,000 a month to have a driver who's
Yeah.
available through the day
Yeah.
and early evening.
Yeah.
And, if I was in Karachi, I could have a rickshaw driver I work with. We'd go and have chai and samosas together once or twice in the day. He'd go and service his family. He'd drop me off. I'd call him. He'd come and pick me up.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even be able to take a car into most of the markets I love to work in anyway.
I know.
And it's so funny that, that's the thing that I crave now,
You've made those connections,
which is just
David.
not here in any shape or form.
No.
And I'm thinking, okay, I'll walk to the studio and I'll walk home. That's going to be 4 hours of my working day to do that because I don't live that close. And
Right.
the days are just not long enough. The daylight is not long enough.
But
The energy is
something
probably
good is
running
going to
out.
come out of all of this. And
It better.
well, look, your Open Studios was a huge success right now, wasn't it? I mean, how many people did you
Well,
interact
I don't know
with?
what we call it a huge success. I talk to lots of people as I do every year, and then I feel like I need psychotherapy or something at the end of it because I just interacted with so many people with different perspectives on life. People
Yeah.
who are, some of those people are extraordinary, and I had some lovely conversations with people who are research and work in museums and things. But a lot of people are just kind of curious about what an artist studio looks like. And lovely as they are, it's the kind of another level of demand. When somebody goes into a gallery, often there's an assistant sitting at a desk on a computer, and you walk around the gallery and walk out. But here, when you go into a studio and there's an artist there, there's a level of expectation, of interaction, and it's a lot. So I'm almost recovered now. It finished on Monday.
The gallery structure you were mentioning is very English. In
Yeah,
Pakistan, as you
very.
very well know,
Yeah,
that there is nobody at a reception, and there is, in my case, there's me who's doing what you are doing at the Open Studio.
I know. And
very
I follow you on Instagram and all the rest of it, and I see the extraordinary work that you do week by week, and it's almost overpowering. It's just so much. It's unbelievable.
Because I think, David, the biggest difference is that in England, people know about art. In Pakistan, there's only a very, very small ratio of people who have any exposure to art. So if you want to run a gallery, it's not just a business, it's also a social service. Because I think about 80% of the time I am talking to people who have not had exposure to art. So you are explaining to them what it is. And even the ones who have had exposure to art certainly have not had exposure to contemporary art, right? So it's a question of getting them to understand what it is, and not being myopic about what they're seeing, about opening their mind to different possibilities, and being receptive, and tolerance, and non-judgmental. There's so many things that you actually are doing. So I understand what you are doing is therapy to others, and
Maybe.
it's exhausting. It is exhausting.
It's not necessarily therapy for me, I can tell you.
No, you
but
provide
I'll tell
therapy
you
for
something
others.
slightly in that context. We did this work in, I was going to say Norway. I can't remember where it was. Do you remember the Container 96 project? I think it was.
Iceland.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
was it
I
Iceland?
do. I
can't
think
remember
it was
where it
Iceland.
was. But anyway, what happened was they made a container city. And the container city was the world map.
Okay.
So the Southeast Asia was in one area, and Northern Europe was in another, and America was another.
Okay.
And that's how they organized it. And then the artists installed themselves in those containers. And when you walked around it, you got a sense of what it was like, what it meant to be an artist in America or North Europe, and what it meant to be an artist sort of around the equator or in the south of the world. And I tell you, the West was obsessed with death. You'd go into a container which had sort of 6 inches of cast gelatine on the floor and a freezer to maintain it. And you walk into stuff, in Southeast Asia. I mean, what we had? We had, I was going to say Heart Mahal. Yeah, we had Heart Mahal for that collaboration.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was sort of typical of the work that was happening, which was full of life.
That's right.
And complexity, rather than the sort of somebody's
light,
vision of death.
Music, so much happening. There was energy in that.
Yeah, energy, exactly. And you're looking at another kind of take on, not a positive take at all. And that was a really strong kind of encounter of that for me. And I think whoever conceived of that show never realized that they were framing it that way. Maybe they couldn't even see it because they'd never lived in another context. But I mean, that's one of the things that is such a strong memory for me.
I think these exhibitions, when they are conceived, is one thing, but they take a life of their own.
Yeah.
And then much later on, you can see them through a totally different prism. I
think in that context, when we make something as an artist, it's the same thing.
Yes.
We make it with whatever motivation. You look back at it over a decade. For instance, in Pakistan, I often work with the idea of the home. It wasn't until I left Pakistan or I left Karachi that I realized I never had a home of my own in Pakistan.
Right.
And that was probably a motivation to look at the home. I mean, although I was looking at it, I thought beyond my own awareness and life. But, motivationally, I'm sure it was having had a home and then not having a home,
And now you have a beautiful home from the photographs.
I have a small home.
It's beautiful.
We had a lovely house in Lahore. Homer got a huge grant. We built a studio on top.
Yeah.
And it wasn't huge, but it was in Lahore, Kent. We sold it. We took the rupees and converted them into pounds, which is a kind of shrinking process, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And bought a tiny house in the UK, which is attached to our houses. And we have a very different life here. I mean, the good thing is it's a house you can close up and move around the world, but there are no servants, no complexity. I mean, what everyone says about servant culture, it mixes you up with society as a whole.
Yeah.
And here, people have headphones on, they walk down the street without looking at anybody else in the eye.
Yeah.
Unless it kind of complicates their lives in some way. It's a very different way of thinking about your life.
And David, here you get stared at. So there are pros and cons of everything. Here you're like, why is this person just staring at me openly, right? So of course it's what happens, and it's how you actually look at things and how you address them. But having said that, I just want to recap again that it has been an absolute pleasure to have worked with you for many years, to have been associated with you, to have followed your career trajectory from the 90s, from Karachi pop, from the time that Durya and you were the brains behind Karachi pop. And then how it, spiraled, how it's gone, where it's gone, the Fukuoka project and all over that you guys have done has been phenomenal. What you have given to all of us, to the art community, to the students that you've nurtured, to the relationships that you have made. Thank you. Really, thank you. You are an archaeologist.
Thank you so much.
Your work is everywhere. It's in my room. It's in almost every room of the gallery. And I am so proud that you have retained those relationships with us, because it is so important. And you are the only, let's say, artist who's not a Pakistani by birth, but you are more Pakistani than a lot of Pakistani artists. You don't need to have been born a Pakistani.
That's very interesting. Maybe they aspire to be something else, and I aspire to be Pakistani.
Correct.
But I aspire to it, knowing what something else is like.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, it's extraordinary to hear you say this. I can't say I think of myself in the same way, but I look forward to coming and working with you and Pakistani society.
Thank you very much to a Pakistani. Pakistan Zindabad. Thanks a lot, David. Take care.
Thank you.
Much love.